I was much younger then, but I think when the Chernobyl nuclear disaster happened, to most people they heard there was a disaster in a city in Ukraine called Chernobyl. Every Twersky around the world, any Hasidic person, when they heard Chernobyl, they knew exactly where it was. Everyone knew that was the seat of the Twerski Hasidic dynasty. And as I mentioned, that's a name I hear every day because I'm a Chernobyl Ranikel. I'm known as a descendant from Chernobyl.
The legacy is illustrious. It includes some of the most famous Hasidic leaders in Jewish history. So it's not so much a matter of pride as it is a matter of responsibility. Having these kinds of ancestors raises questions as to what you are and whether you're living up to the goals of those ancestors, and the answer is very often very not well. We're talking about some of the holiest and grandiose people in Jewish history, and it's very hard to match that.
Two centuries before the catastrophic nuclear accident in Chernobyl, this small Ukrainian town was known as the seat of one of the most prominent Hasidic dynasties.
My name is Yitz Twersky of Kew Garden Hills, Queens. My father was Rabbi Yosef Twersky of Bronx, New York. His father was Mordechai Yisrael Twersky of Chotin, Ukraine. His father was Baruch Meir Twersky of Azarnitz, Ukraine. His father was Menachem Twersky, who lived in Chernobyl. Menachem Nachum's father was Mordechai Twersky, the Grand Rabbi of Chernobyl, and his father was the original Twersky, Menachem Twersky of Chernobyl, Ukraine.
Menachem Twersky, the first rabbinical Twersky in recorded history, was a student of Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, a branch of Orthodox Judaism. He was born around 1730 and came to Chernobyl in the 1770s as a preacher. Later, Menachem became Chernobyl's rabbi.
He wrote a book called the Me'or Einayim, the Light of the Eyes. That was a foundation of Hasidic ideology in those days.
Menachem's son Mordechai had 8 sons of his own. Each then went to a different Ukrainian city and established rabbinical courts there. This was the beginning of the great rabbinical dynasty. Until the middle of the 20th century, through the times of pogroms and the Holocaust, there was always a Twersky presence in Ukraine.
My grandfather was the rabbi of the city of Chotin in southern Ukraine. In 1941, the Germans came in, the city was bombed, and everyone was gathered into a school.
Entire Jewish populations were targeted by the Nazis, including all the rabbis, intellectuals, doctors, lawyers, Zionist leaders. They were told that they would be moved into labor camps, but instead they were massacred. Mass executions like this one in Latvia wiped out entire families. The Twerski family in southern Ukraine lost many of its members.
As they were marching my grandfather, as they were marching him out, they passed by a lake. It was the Dniester. And my grandfather jumped out of the line and jumped into the water. And all the people are screaming, "The Rebbe Teufelzahn." The Rebbe is going to make himself ritually pure before he's being killed.
Yitz Twersky grew up in Pelham Parkway in the Bronx. His father, Rabbi Yosef Twersky, moved to the United States after surviving the Second World War, the death of his parents, and years in concentration camps. Yitz has always known about his heritage, but as a young man growing up in New York City, he was not too interested in the stories from 2 centuries ago.
When I was in college at Yeshiva University, I went to a funeral. My father took me to a grand rabbi's funeral. That one thing led to the next, and I started researching who my family was, who were these people at the funeral, how we related, and that started off a series of 30 years of introspection, learning a lot about myself. I want to know everything about the Twerski family. So I started out at the New York Public Library, where in those days they had phone books, huge bookshelves of phone books, and I actually went through manually every phone book, wrote down every Twerski's name, and started making calls, and started building trees, and started going through other record books.
Over the last 30 years, Yitz Twersky has been gathering the history of his family and searching for other descendants of Menachem. According to Mr. Twersky's estimates, there are about 50,000 people who belong to the Twersky family.
I documented 25,000 people about 15 years ago. I have stopped the documentation of all the rabbinical descendants. I kind of decided to get married and have 5 kids.
What unites all the known Twersky descendants is their strong connection to Chernobyl. No matter how far away from contemporary Ukraine they live, the Tverskys return to Chernobyl and other towns in Ukraine to pay tribute to their heritage.
This is a very emotional footage. The first time I went, I was trying to find my grandmother's grave, couldn't find it. So we went to the Marachva, which was a camp then, and we're looking around for hours. Hours we're looking around for my father. He buried his mother, but look at the place. It's overgrown for years. And we say, give up. We left. We gave up. We're going to leave. And as we're leaving,
you see how I spotted it? Yes, right here. I showed it. You see a Chatim, Azaris? You see
Yeah, I see Twersky also, and I don't believe it.
so these glasses belong to my grandfather, Mordechai Yisrael of Chatin. These glasses were found in his coat when the mass grave was opened many years after he was killed. As the story is told by Rabbi Horowitz, that he was totally intact, and Rabbi Horowitz had cut open his frock and found these glasses inside and brought them to America and gave them to my father, made out of solid gold.
For dozens of years, Mr. Twersky has been the guardian of the family treasures passed on to him by his father. Letters signed by his grandfather, family silverware, and religious relics. One day, Mr. Twersky will pass them to his sons, and the tradition will live on.
I don't think this could, actually...
Mordechai of Chernobyl, the second rabbi of Chernobyl that I mentioned, was the first grand rabbi to take something called pidyonos. He used to take coins from people. So a person used to come and ask for a blessing. He used to write something on a piece of paper and give him some money for the blessing. He took those coins and melted them down, gave it to the Tsar silversmith in those days, and built this extremely ornate Seder plate, which has animals and engravings of all the houses of the 8 sons, the palaces of these sons of Mordechai of Chernobyl. Here on the table are various artifacts from the city of Chernobyl. Here are tefillin that go back a few hundred years, that my father wore, that my grandfather and Chatin wore, that go back to the sofer of the Baal Shem Tov. My father actually wore them through the camps.
After having spent 3 decades as a family historian and discovering the unknown Tverskys around the globe, from Australia to the United States to South Africa, Yitz Twersky was not sure if all of them were members of the rabbinical dynasty, or merely people who for some reason took the name. Then, 2 years ago, his research reached another level.
In August of last year, I received a call from 2 gentlemen who are working on a genealogy project. One was Jeff Mark Paul, and the other was Dr. Jeffrey Briskman. They were doing a DNA study of rabbinical families and asked to do a similar study on the Twerski family.
What we'll try to do with Twersky, and I think we will succeed based on the results we're seeing so far, is identify the unique genetic fingerprint or signature of the Twersky rabbinical lineage.
So far, the researchers have found 6 descendants out of the 8 sons of Mordechai of Chernobyl, and they are waiting for the results of further DNA tests. Mr. Twersky is confident that pretty soon the rabbinical family tree of the Twerski family will be complete. Many of the Tversky descendants moved to the United States after the Russian Revolution and the Second World War. Nowadays, there exist large Hasidic communities in the states of Wisconsin, Colorado, and New York. 40 miles away from New York City is New Square, an entirely Hasidic village in Rockland County, New York. It is the seat of another Chernobyl descendant, Grand Rabbi David Twersky.
Grand Rabbi David Twersky, who's the Grand Rabbi of New Square, is a son after son from Menachem Nachum. What makes him so unique is he is the closest son after son alive today. His father's name was Grand Rabbi Yaakov Yosef Twersky. His father was Grand Rabbi David Twersky from the city of Skvira. His father was Rabbi Yitzchak Twersky, who was the Grand Rabbi of the city of Skvira, and he was the son of Mordechai, the Grand Rabbi of Chernobyl. whose father, Menachem Nachum, was the originator of the family.
The idea of building a village, which is going to be like the Chernobyl village in the United States, was very uncommon. We had all types of opposition and all types of obstacles, and there was a tremendous, tremendous struggle. The foundation of our village in Uskwe today is Chernobyl.
Yitz Twersky is confident that every Hasidic rabbi alive today is related to Menachem Nachum. There has been a centuries-long tradition of marrying within the family to preserve the purity of the rabbinical lineage. Yitz Twersky, however, decided to break the tradition.
For me, I decided to do something called Yichus Atzma. I decided to go with someone who has their own royalty. I was looking for the most honest, decent person I could find. And best decision I've ever made.
There's 12 people at tonight's meal and 12 people at tomorrow's meal. Most of the cooking is done already. So there's the cutlets, which is for tomorrow's meal, and got the challah, which is in the crock pot. Roast in the fridge, and there are pickles, and there's rice, and there's 3 different desserts, and 7 side dishes, salads, all made. Nothing made by, we make everything from scratch. And I work full time.
Every Friday evening, the Twerski family gathers around the Shabbat table. Yitz and Elka light candles, and Elka says a prayer. Shabbat is a special time in their life, the time to spend with the family, the time to remember who they are and where they came from. The descendants of a great Chernobyl family, living among us today and keeping the ancient history of Chernobyl in their hearts.
One of the key questions is why am I doing all this stuff and why is it so important to me? I see it as my father's duty is that his father shouldn't be forgotten. My father came to America, rebuilt his life, made a synagogue, had children. I'm not a rabbi. I work in technology and healthcare. I have to find a way to continue that tradition in my own way, my small little way, to keep the name alive, keep the tradition alive. My own way is finding the Twerskys around the world, keeping them all together, writing books, posters, music, things to keep the family traditions and the name Twersky alive in a positive light.
Shall